Welcome to this first Satsanga of 2016, held on the 21st of January 2017 in conjunction with Kevin Moore and The Moore Show. And Happy New Year to you all. It's great to be able to speak to you again in this brand new year, and with lots of things happening frequently, so it's going to be interesting to be able to feedback to you what's going on over the year. We've got a good agenda today to be able to go through. Firstly, I'm going to talk on UFOs, what they are, what are aliens, and where they come from. I suppose there's lots of texts surrounding this, the conjectures and understandings and abductions and everything else, but I'm just going to give you the information based upon my understanding. Then we've got some participants' questions. Some are based upon some of my books, Beyond the Source books and the And Dialogues books, and there's another series of questions based upon the talk I'm about to give. And then we're going to go through an end of meat meditation just to reconnect us with Source. One where it allows us to be connected to Source while we're here on Earth. So rather than having to move through frequencies, we can bring Source to us here. Okay, so the first part of it is, what are UFOs? I'll deal with it in the three parts. What are UFOs? What are aliens? Where do they come from? Well, the UFOs are basically the vehicles of various different incarnate life forms, and those that aren't incarnate, those that are energetic. I'll go through the incarnate first. As we know, they're vehicles that allow them to pass from one particular location within the physical universe to another. I mean, we consider them to be localized to our galaxy, but they can move between different parts of the physical universe based upon using what I would call intrafrequential methodologies. That means they move up into the frequencies where things happen faster. The space associated with the physical universe is different, and it allows them to move vast distances in fractions of a second. So they are basically vehicles that allow those entities to move around. Now, the vehicles themselves are obviously of various different designs and various different origins, depending upon the incarnate vehicles that have designed and developed them. But in essence, they do two things. One, they allow the transportation of those entities, and they can be from very mechanical means, very similar to what we would call spacecraft here. Or they would appear to be like that, and of course there's plenty of science fiction films that depict various different forms of small craft that would be associated with large mothercraft, so to speak. And there are those which are sort of fairly energetic. Now, in terms of the physical ones, or the mechanical ones, as I would say, they basically do two functions. One, they would work with entities that are of various different frequential states. Now, the physical universe isn't just the frequencies that we see around us now. It's based upon 12 frequencies, and so there are entities that are incarnate in frequencies above those associated with what we can see and detect with our physical eyes and our detecting systems, our sort of X-ray based machines, infrared, ultraviolet based machines. And so we have the ability to understand things only based upon who and what we are. So the various different mechanical methods of transportation, the craft that are used, can be created in frequencies that are above those of the Earth. Well, the Earth being a pan-frequential body, it exists on all 12 frequencies. But so there are obviously entities and vehicles that are here that we can't see because they're a higher frequency, but nevertheless they're here on Earth. And if we can move up and down the frequencies, and we can with the Traversing the Frequencies workshops and correspondence courses, then we can see or perceive the different activities, the entities, their vehicles, and any buildings that they create on the Earth at these various different levels. And so what we have is a vehicle that is not specifically on the third frequency. The frequencies, in my understanding, are what create our universe, not dimensions. Dimensions are a much higher level of structure. So when we talk about three dimension, my understanding is it's the three frequential states associated with the lower frequencies of the physical universe. So the UFOs themselves have their origins in various different locations within the physical universe, and various different frequencies within the physical universe, and so they can travel around within their own frequency or in frequencies above what they are. Now, if they are based upon maybe the third or fourth frequency, in the fourth frequency we wouldn't see them or perceive them, but they would be able to move around here without us knowing. If they're based in the third frequency, then we would see them. So even though they could move around higher frequencies and be fairly mechanical, they would be seen to us and be able to transport themselves through higher frequencies as well. Those that are of a higher frequency we wouldn't see at all. And I'll come back to those because that also sort of links into the energetic versions of the UFOs that we see. So when they move through higher frequencies to move around, you get this visibility of these craft suddenly making extreme changes in direction, for instance, or they appear to disappear and reappear. It's because they're using an intra-frequency drive to allow them to move around, and various different cosmic energies. I think in the history of God it's called starburst energy. That's one particular methodology, but they use these different energies to move around and move themselves in different places. And if they're at a frequency but nevertheless mechanical or physical vehicle, they also provide a function of protection. The entities or incarnate entities, whether they're based upon Earth or whether they're based upon other locations within our particular galaxy or other galaxies within the physical universe, are also binding to the laws associated with frequential states. And so if they come down the frequencies, then they are subject to those lower frequencies, and that means that their abilities and functions associated with higher frequency existence, albeit still incarnate, start to disappear. So in the same way that when we project, or our true energetic self projects an aspect, smaller aspect of itself, what we call a soul or shard or subsoul, into a gross physical body to be able to experience the frequencies in the way they're supposed to be experienced, for instance experiencing resistance in terms of not being able to pass through various different solid objects, then we start to lose our communicative ability as well, because the bandwidth associated with our ability to communicate with our true energetic selves versus who and what we are now is limited. So the lower down the frequencies we get, the lower the bandwidth. The higher up the frequencies we go, the higher the bandwidth. And so when we come down the frequencies, we start to lose this bandwidth associated with our communicative ability with ourselves, our counterparts, and our true energetic self, and we start to forget who and what we are. So we can't really come down here to this level in these craft without losing some part of ourselves, and this is the same with entities. So when they move down, they have to protect themselves, and what they do is they protect themselves by surrounding the inside of this craft and the outside of the craft in some instances with a field that maintains their ambient frequential state. So that means that they although they may come down to the third frequency level where we are now, they may be maintaining the fifth or sixth frequency level within their craft or within the confines of the energies surrounding their craft. And so sometimes these entities just land and that's it. Sometimes you just see them moving through the air and that's it. And any entities that come out, you might see them glowing as well, because they will have a similar force field, so to speak, surrounding them that's maintaining their natural ambient frequency, so they can maintain their communicative ability, their functions, and their ability to communicate with their own counterparts or colleagues at the same time. And so we see craft glowing and we see entities glowing as well at the same time. Now, when we see them moving through the air, we sometimes see glowing balls, for instance, and these aren't orbs, these are something else. I mean, orbs are something that are picked up by digital photography, because the coupled charge devices associated with the digital camera is picking up things of a higher frequency that we can't see with the physical eye, and then translating it into a colour palette which is relative to our physical eye. So when we see these things in the air as spheres, glowing spheres, they are not orbs. They are either the mechanical craft surrounded by a protective field to maintain the frequency within them, or they are the energetic versions. Now, if we have entities who are energetic, they won't particularly need to have a mechanical device to protect them. But what they will have is an energy set. So they will move around surrounded by an energy. And that particular energy is one that maintains their own frequency, because as they come down to this frequency, as with incarnate beings, they also suffer the loss of bandwidth, communicative bandwidth, and knowledge, memory and function associated with this as well. So they also have to protect themselves, and they protect themselves with an energy that they create themselves. And so we see two types of UFOs: mechanical with protection to maintain the ambient frequency of the occupants inside, and purely energetic. Okay, the purely mechanical is for those entities who are based upon the third frequency, which is where we as incarnate human beings tend to reside, although there are individuals who move up to the fourth frequency as well. The mechanical but with protection are those who are of a higher frequency, maybe the fourth or fifth or even the sixth frequency, and the energetic is purely energetic. Okay, so that they're in a disincarnate state. So we move on to the aliens or the entities themselves now, and again there's two versions. There's basically, from a generic perspective, the energetic, i.e. those entities that are they're maintaining themselves in the energetic state, and don't incarnate into a vehicle that allows them to experience the lower frequencies in the way they're supposed to be experienced. So they stay as energy, sentient energy, in a similar way to us as our true energetic self when we disincarnate, but they are still projected from their true energetic self. And so these aspects of the true energetic self still move around in the physical universe, but to experience it or to sort of observe certain things, but they protect themselves with a self-created energy because they have the functionality of being able to do so. And so we have the purely energetic being, which is not normally resident for evolutionary purposes in the physical universe, or they maybe just come into the physical universe or certain parts of the physical universe to be able to experience or observe certain activities or events that are happening there. For the incarnate entities, they can be of any frequency associated with the physical universe, any of the 12 frequencies. Normally the first three frequencies are used to construct a gross physical body. So if you want to call it three frequencies or a three dimension, mankind calls them three dimensions, but as I've just explained, they're not three dimensions, they're three frequencies. The dimensions are a higher function. But they nevertheless create this, what we would understand as a three-dimensional state, which being the gross physical. The fourth, fifth, sixth and seventh frequencies are the spirituo-physical, the sort of little bit between the energetic and the gross physical, and then we have the frequencies above that, which are purely energetic, whilst still being, from our perspective, part of the physical universe. So the 12 frequencies associated with the physical universe are the lowest frequencies. They create a physical condition of various different levels of density or finitude. The first three create the gross physical, the next four create the spiritual physical, or a mixture between the two, and the rest of them are fairly high frequency, very, very high frequency levels of physicality. From the perspective of an incarnation, there are incarnated vehicles that exist on those levels. They exist on the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th and 12th levels. But as you can imagine, the higher up the frequencies you go, the less dense the vehicle that is created to be able to experience those levels. And so incarnation is something which is governed by a frequential state, and the level of experience and the level of difficulty of experience is governed by the lowest of the frequencies associated with it. So the incarnate vehicles come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, depending upon the location of origin of their manifestation, what we would call a planet, and the location within a particular galaxy. And as you can see from the number of different life forms on the Earth, there are as many different life forms or incarnate vehicles in the rest of the physical universe as there are on Earth. In fact, there's countless numbers more as well. I'm not going to put a figure on it because it'd be stupid to do so. But if you can see the plethora of life forms, various different vehicles that are used to move around the Earth, it's fairly similar, but to the power of 10, I'm being told, at least, for the various different versions that are in the rest of the physical universe, specifically the gross physical universe. The types of vehicles that are used in the higher frequencies associated with the physical universe are more manipulable, more sort of shape changerish, if you want to call it that. But nevertheless, they are a vehicle that is being used to allow them to move around in the gross physical without being without being affected too much, but also it's allowing them to experience those frequencies in the way they're supposed to experience them. Now, so people have all sorts of different comments about different entities are malevolent and different entities are benevolent. And the only thing I could say is that is true, specifically on the third frequency level. There are entities that are malevolent and those that are benevolent. The higher up the frequencies an entity is, whether it's incarnate, the more benevolent they are, because they understand the greater reality as a normal function of their higher frequential state, even though they're incarnate. The lower down the frequencies, of course, we forget this sort of stuff, like we do when we incarnate in the human vehicle, because we're in lower frequency and we don't have the bandwidth, the communicative ability to communicate with the rest of us, and our memory sets associated with our true energetic self and the activities that we've had as separated or individualized aspects of sentient energy from our true energetic self. So we also have this low frequency thoughts, behaviours and actions, and it's these low frequency thoughts, behaviours and actions which create a link or an attraction or an addiction to being here, something that we call karma. Okay, so there's various different entities here and various different levels of shall we say interaction with us. Now, where do they come from? Everywhere within the physical universe and every frequency within the physical universe. So all of the different galaxies that are out there, and there are countless millions, perhaps billions of galaxies that are part of the physical universe, and that's just those we can see. Clearly there's more habitats, so to speak, or more structure within the physical universe than we can see, and if we go higher up the frequencies, then we see more and more and more. So when we get to the 12th frequency, we would see that the physical universe is absolutely packed with structure and entities using it at various different frequential states, both energetic and, for want of a better word, incarnate at various different levels of frequency and finitude. Okay, so that's sort of a nutshell of what these things are. And what I think I'm going to do is I was going to answer the questions in the order that they arrived, but there's some questions that are asked relevant to this. So I'm going to answer these questions first because it keeps things in the same genre, and then I'll go to the questions that are outside, i.e. those questions that are asking questions about some parts of one or two of my books, because they're separate. So I'm going to answer the questions about UFOs and aliens first, and then go on to the questions about my books. Okay. So the first question is, this week the CIA released 13 million declassified documents, some of which record UFO sightings. And the questions are, did some governments have first contact with alien species during World War II, e.g. Hitler or Eisenhower? Did they reverse engineer the craft and technology that the aliens had, e.g. the Greys in Roswell? And this is to prepare us for worldwide disclosure about aliens soon. In terms of disclosure, they're already here. They move around us. Most of the time they're higher frequency, those at higher frequency than where we are, what we can perceive, which is the higher than the third frequency level, and so they're here already. So any sort of disclosure isn't really relevant, specifically those individuals who are high enough frequency within their own incarnate state as human beings to be able to perceive them, and there are many people on Earth who can, myself included, and so they're already here. In terms of us understanding or disclosing them, again, if you know they're here, there's nothing to disclose. We know they're here. But there are various different levels of contact that have been had, various different technologies that have been discovered. Some are not specifically alien, but were Earth-based technologies that were here and have been uncovered. And certainly the Third Reich were very good at hunting down some of these old technologies and working out how they operated and mastering them in some levels or respects. Some of those are post-Atlantean technologies that came down, and some of them are still around. Some of them are still stored and protected, and some of them are still in the Himalayas, for instance, and other areas of, shall we say, difficulty to get to. Or they're buried in the ground or buried in mountains, those sort of things. But there are contacts. It's not specifically governments that have contacts. The entities try to find people who are understanding. There are a number of we talk about aliens being malevolent, and some of the interactions with them can be classified as that. But it's mainly to do with looking at individuals who are in secondary incarnations, who are actually having a primary incarnation, which is part of the incarnate vehicles that are associated with those aliens. So when we have abductions, we have abductions of vehicles because the soul associated with that vehicle, a human vehicle, has a primary incarnation in a vehicle which is associated with the aliens who are abducting them. So they're basically getting downloads and things from that body, because that soul has decided to, through mechanical means or assisted mechanical means with some energetic ability, to experiment with being here whilst also being in a different location as well. So as a secondary incarnation. So there are elements of individuals who've managed to gain craft and reverse engineer them. Clearly reverse engineering is something which is only available to us if we have a level of understanding in science which is capable of understanding that science in the first place. So the level of reverse engineering as such was limited in the early days, certainly when they first appeared on Earth, or there were damaged craft that first were discovered here. And so it's even now, with some of the technologies we've got, and clearly we have more computing technology progression than we've had of anything else on this planet, we're able to understand and decipher some of the operating systems and power sources of these craft. But even now, we really don't have any understanding of the propulsion systems of these things. So there has been, in my understanding, an attempt to be able to reverse engineer them. But you can only reverse engineer something if you've got a level of technology which is equal to that technology that you're trying to reverse engineer. That's engineering, full stop, and that's technology, full stop, and that's science, full stop. And the only way we'd be able to do that is if we were given help by the entities themselves. And there are various different entities who have given us technologies, but those technologies have been given to us subliminally or telepathically, or via the guides and helpers of the entities who have decided to incarnate and be here to introduce new technologies, such as Edison, for instance, and Marconi. Those sort of individuals who've made amazing breakthroughs in technology that you think, how did that happen? You know, things that happen very, very radically is what happens. So disclosure, at some point in the next 50 years, there'll be a begrudging level of understanding. But as we move high up the frequencies, then the disclosure it won't be sort of disclosure. It'll be more discovery that there's people and objects here anyway. So it's going to be a natural thing rather than a sudden governmental thing. Although one thing you will understand is some of the science fiction films we've been having, and stories surrounding them, and other different things surrounding science fiction or science fact or spiritual subjects or metaphysical subjects, are being used to help to educate us and get us ready for it. Okay. So the second question here is, some sources say that humanity is being protected by benevolent aliens from destroying itself with nuclear weapons. In brackets, for example, launch code malfunctions. Is it true that some event streams or timelines, but not in others? So, and are we now subject to our new president's nuclear policy impulses of hotspots of conflict around the world? The Earth is an important location in terms of its evolutionary opportunity through individualised free will. And so there are a number of entities who are of a higher frequency, who are protecting the asset, so to speak. And so, although we are allowed to do certain things, such as the explosion of certain thermonuclear devices, as long as it's within a certain tolerance, so to speak, it is tolerated. And so, in effect, we allowed to progress in certain ways with the understanding, this is technically by the way, with the understanding that it has to be within a certain tolerance. If it's over a certain tolerance, then there are things that go wrong, so to speak. Things that don't happen, so to speak, such as Large Hadron Colliders not doing what they're supposed to do. And the information that Large Hadron Collider doing is, for want of a better word, easily produced by Cheku geometry. Something you could put in your hand could create what this Large Hadron Collider is trying to do. So there's things that there's roads that we're going down that are tolerated, but they are, if they go out of a certain tolerance, then they're, for want of a better word, neutralised. It's a better way of saying it. Okay. So in terms of subjected to impulses in hotspots of conflict around the world, even in the physical universe, there are local areas of locally high frequency and local areas of locally low frequency, and as such, those areas will always result in differences of opinion, and those differences of opinion are, in effect, the areas where there's conflict. And so what we have is the areas of locally low frequency cause conflict to the point where there's people fighting against each other to try and prove their point, and areas of locally high frequency are where people understand each other, work together, and create an understanding that is a collective understanding rather than an individualised understanding. Okay. So, and as we in general ascend the frequencies, and the need to exist within the lower frequencies of the Earth start to dissipate, we will start to naturally move away from this, and the numbers of low frequency hotspots will start to disappear as the base ambient frequency of where we exist in starts to rise. Okay. Last particular question is that what are 4D humanoid beings? Now, in this instance, 4D would mean fourth dimension, but in my understanding, it's fourth frequency, because the fourth dimension is a significantly higher dimensional state in terms of the structure of the multiverse compared to where we are now. We're in the first dimension now, dimension being a structural condition which has 3 subdimensions to it, and in general each subdimension has 12 frequency points, and each frequency point is a universal environment or self-contained simultaneous universal environment in its own right, except the first full dimension doesn't do that. Although it has three subdimensional conditions, they converge back into one, which only allows 12 frequencies to be created, but those 12 frequencies, either in chunks of them or separately, can't create a universe in their own right, but altogether they can. So this question, what are fourth dimension humanoid aliens called, and I'll come to the rest of it in a moment, it really refers to, in my mind, fourth frequency humanoid aliens, and they're called the Anunnaki. Okay, and in brackets called as descendants of the Anu. Now the Anu, in my understanding and in the understanding of various Hindu texts, are the lowest physical function, manifested physical function of the physical universe. They are the smallest particles that create who and what we are, and the environment that we're in. And so it looks like these particular entities have been given a name based upon what you could classify as the start or the beginning of. The comments basically is that they are entities. They are not specifically fourth dimension. They're just slightly higher frequency. The bell you can hear is one of my cats walking across the living room. He needs the bell because he's a bit of a terror with the local wildlife. Okay, so the particles are nothing to do with the Anu, although their gross physical forms are manufactured or created by Anu, as ours are, and as the rest of the physical universe is. There's all sorts of stories about them, and one of the particular comments here is that apparently some Anunnaki sects came to Mars, mined it and destroyed it, and they came to Earth about 400,000 years ago, and genetically manipulated human beings to make them a slave race to work in their mining projects in Africa. They worked with the Atlanteans, became their guides and rulers, procreated with some humans to establish bloodlines of human rulers, e.g. the Illuminati, and then gave humans the ability to procreate themselves and split genders. They changed and accelerated the Earth experiment. Okay. There are times when entities take advantage of a lower level of intelligence. Now, if an incarnate civilization are low enough frequency to be able to not understand the bigger picture, then they will potentially try to use an incarnate civilization of lower intelligence or lower technology to assist them in some way. Whether you want to call it slavery or whether you want to call it partnership is up to the listener. But in essence, there are times when this happens. Now, my understanding is that there have been episodes similar to what's been described, and there are entities who have been given sort of higher technological understandings of things and higher teachings associated with being in the higher frequencies and being able to create higher frequencies, and sometimes to be able to accelerate the development of the human form. There have been, shall we say, manipulation of the genome. Now, generally though, manipulation of the genome is done by the group of entities who worked with other entities to create this area of the physical universe that is associated with free will. And so most of the manipulation of the human genome has been a result of the higher levels of thought process surrounding those individuals who govern the physical universe and the opportunity for accelerated evolutionary growth as a result of that. Some of those are a function of the curators, which are a group of entities who work on behalf of the source to manage, manipulate and maintain the evolutionary efficiency of the multiversal environment we exist within. Now then, looking at the rest of the question, it talks about the so-called changing of the human body to create the genders, the male and female genders, that they changed and accelerated the Earth experiment. My understanding is that, as I just said, there are certain levels of manipulation associated with entities who are working either for themselves or on behalf of some of the curators and some of those beings who are in control of the physical universe. But in general, they are being done by those entities who are controlling the physical universe and looking after the evolutionary efficiency of the multiverse and the experiment which is to do with individualized free will. So any real change in the genome of the human form has been done by these beings. This one of the councils. I mean, we talk about a council of 12, but there's a council of 12 associated with each of the different frequential states that are capable of supporting an incarnate vehicle. And so when we look at the different functions of the human form, we can see, and if you refer to the book The History of God, it explains it, that the human vehicle has changed, and it has changed or been changed to suit the frequential state that has become its ambient frequency. So when it was a higher frequency, it was recreated by energetic means, by the separation out of particles or atoms, to create two bodies out of one, for instance, and then that was recreated in a similar way again. So you got one body equals 2, and then 2 bodies equal 4, and then 4 bodies equal 8, as an example. And then it eventually came to the point where the lower frequencies, or should I say, the lower frequencies didn't come, we descended into the lower frequencies. And so the body became more gross physical, or needed to become more gross physical to be able to experience and interact with that environment. And eventually it got to the point where the reproduction process was based upon the hermaphroditic methodology, and then eventually that wasn't good enough because of the transmission of genetically passed on dysfunctions, and so there needed to be diversification, and so there was various different other means of doing that, and one of those was the creation of the two genders, where the genders would get together to procreate and create a body, but they could come from various different locations with various different levels of immunity, fitnesses, and physical benefits, as the case may be. Those that were physically strong were the bodies that would survive, where those that were or adapted would survive. Those who didn't adapt wouldn't survive, and this is where you get Darwinian evolution, the survival of the fittest. So there's a level of sort of interaction there, and there are lots of different races from different parts of the galaxy on Earth, as you can see from the different bone structures, eye structures, skin colours, intelligence associated with various different locations on the Earth. And although intelligence is simply a function of education in real terms, but all the different races on Earth right now are a function of those aspects of those gross physical bodies that have sort of adapted and survived when they would normally have died off as a result of the change in frequential state. So all of the functions we have of the different types of genome on the Earth are where there's been a new body introduced, and sometimes that new body has been developed in a different part of the physical universe and different parts of the galaxy, and introduced on Earth to cope with the new change in frequency, the new lower change in frequencies. And where one body was a higher frequency and it was subjected to a lower frequency, it either died off, or some of them started to be able to adapt to work in the lower frequencies and became lower frequency as well. And so that's why we have the lowest frequency bodies and all the different diversification of different genomes, bone structures, muscle types, colour, eye types, and skin types as well. And so that sort of explains that. So there's been two things in terms of the manipulation of the human genome. One that's been done by lower frequency but nevertheless star-faring entities, which I'm being told there are various stories about the Anunnaki, but most of it is sort of passed down through legend and has been distorted and destroyed in terms and become misinformation in real terms. And there's other bodies that have been manipulated by those entities that govern the physical universe to allow the human body to be able to be more compatible with the frequencies that it was starting to work with. Okay, so that sort of explains that. Procreation with other humans to establish new bloodlines, again, that's just a function of genetic manipulation. The way, with all of these things, when the things are explained to us, we can only work with the language and the understanding based upon our own evolutionary level and technological experience and language surrounding it. So the words that are used to explain things that have happened would have been relevant to the language of the time and the understanding of the time. So what could be classified as being procreation could have been just simply genetic or DNA strain introduction, for instance. And so things would have been done in, for instance, a test tube or in a higher frequential state, rather than the simple procreation of one particular incarnate vehicle type with another, because there needs to be compatibility. So the only way that some of them are compatible would have been through the splicing of genome together, rather than the physical interaction. Okay, so the physical interaction of human beings on Earth is from my understanding, is fairly unique. So it would have needed to be at a DNA level anyway. Okay, right. So that's the end of the questions surrounding the UFOs and the aliens and what they are, who they are. And don't forget that the different physical forms are based upon the environment that they exist in, depending upon whether they are in a silicon or a carbon-based environment or a crystalline-based environment, and other types of environments. or the atmosphere of the planets, or the areas of locally low density that they're being used to experience their existence on. Okay. So I'm going to move on to the next two questions now, which are based upon the books. And this first one is based upon Beyond the Source Book 2. And it says, on page 39, Source Entity 7A, for those of you who haven't read Beyond the Source Book 2, Source Entity 7 was split into 3 versions. And so I ended up with a dialogue with all 3 versions of Source Entity 7. Okay. And it says, consider your own planet, it went backwards, did it not? And I answered, yes, it did. And the question is, what is this? What happened more than... Has it happened more than once? Did it have a devastating consequences for all life forms? And did it affect humans? Yes, it has happened more than once. Every time we've had a civilization change, there's been a reduction in frequency associated with it. Or should I say, the reduction in frequency has been created by us. So every time we go backwards, it's not that the planet goes backwards, it's the case that we who habitate the planet go backwards, or should say we drop down the frequencies through being addicted to or maintaining a desire to be here and experiencing low frequency experiences. And so it's happened for all of the different civilizations that have been here, the major civilizations, of which the last major civilization was the Atlantean period, and of course since then we've had the Egyptian and what we are now. But the Egyptian and what we are now is the same civilization basically. So in essence there's been a number of different, at least 5 drops in frequency, and as a result of that the consequences were that we had to redevelop to the human form. So this links in a little bit to the last set of questions about UFOs and aliens. So the human form was modified by those entities who disincarnate but nevertheless govern the frequential states of the different frequential states of the physical universe, and those that govern the evolution opportunities supported by having individualized free will on Earth. And so the devastating consequences are we dropped down the frequencies. We dropped down the frequencies to another point, another frequential state within which the Earth exists within. So the Earth exists as a pan-frequential body. It is capable of existing in all 12 frequencies associated with the physical universe, as is all the physical universe that we can see. It's just that we only see part of it. Okay. So, and yes, it did affect human beings. It affected us because we lost our ability to communicate with who and what we are. We lost our ability to commune with each other, and we lost our ability to move around different bodies easily. We lost the ability to commune with the animals and the earth and various other entities within the locale of this particular body within this particular galaxy. So we lost. So we continually lost, not just once, but a number of times, continually lost our communicative bandwidth and functionality associated with it. Okay, so I hope that answers that question. Next question is in the Ann dialogues. It's in page 113. Ann places the Earth in a quarantined section of the physical universe. What is this quarantine? How large is it? How is it enforced? Is it ever breached? And how is it that both positive and negative spirits are here? Is there a barrier? And if so, what is this nature? Is this a permanence barrier? And who designed it to keep? Who designed to keep it to keep things out, or is it designed to contain us? Right, the Earth is in a quarantined section of the physical universe, as Anne in the Ann dialogues describes, because of the potential effects associated with individualised free will, in terms of the addiction to low frequency thoughts, behaviours and actions. And so there is if you like, a known barrier around it, so to speak. Now, entities do come and go. We know that. They are here and they're observing and they're working with us now. And in the past, there's all sorts of other different things going on. But as described in the first part of this Satsanga. So the quarantine is not specifically a function of keeping us in or us away from others or stopping us interacting with others. It's more a function of when entities move out of this quarantined area, any desires, thoughts, behaviours and actions associated with low frequency existence, again associated with having individualised free will, are dissipated. And so what that means is it surrounds the, I'm being told, about 12 parsecs around the Earth area. And so entities can move in and move out, but the issues surrounding individualised free will as created by mankind don't stick to them, so to speak. They're allowed to move in, they can interact with us, and anything that would be classified as being karmic from their perspective, and the spreading of sort of low frequency thought, behaviours and actions that would come from us onto them and ruining their collective or individualised will, so to speak, is removed. So it's a quarantine in so much as it keeps in the energies surrounding the, let's call it the negative functions of individualised free will, and not the positive functions. So really it keeps in what we classify as being negative thoughts, negative behaviours, negative actions. So spirits that or entities that stay in this particular area of quarantined energy will maintain that level of low frequency thought, behaviours and actions as we do. But if they're not if they're not from our location, they're from a location outside of this barrier, outside this energy barrier, which is, by the way, maintained by those entities who are working with this particular experiment of individualised free will, then if they stay inside it, they maintain their low frequencies. If they move out of it, for instance, back into their normal area or location within the physical universe, anything associated with that is removed. So it is very much a case of quarantined area. If you stay in there and you get attracted to low frequency thoughts, behaviours and actions, you would keep them, and you would maybe go down go in a downward spiral the same as we do. Or if they get the chance of remembering who and what they are and move out, they would have that removed, stripped off them, so that they return to what they are. So, but that's only for those entities, energetic or incarnate, so to speak, at the various different levels associated with the gross physical universe and the physical universe. Gross physical being the first three, that are outside or normally exist or have their origins outside of this 12 parsec barrier. Okay, so it's there to make sure that, if you like, if you consider the opportunities for being addicted to low frequency thoughts, behaviours and actions associated with gross physical free will as like a virus, this is like a protection against the virus spreading, so to speak. And so when entities move out of that area, they go through this cleansing barrier. Well, let's call it a cleansing barrier rather than a quarantine area. It quarantines the virus in, keeps the virus in, but anything that moves out gets cleansed and comes out the other side. The only thing is that we can't move outside of that. The only time that we would move outside of that barrier is when we become disincarnate, or when at some point in the future we rise above the frequencies and we start to move back up the frequencies to those levels that are consistent with an advanced level of evolution and having an incarnate vehicle associated with that advanced level of evolution. And so we would be in the fourth, fifth, sixth upwards frequencies, because the higher up the frequencies we go, the more memory of who and what we are we have, and on top of that we also get increased functionality and increased bandwidth and communicative ability. Okay, so I hope that answers that particular question as well, which is quite a good question actually, a very seeking question. So this part of the Satsanga now, I want to go through reconnecting with Source again, and connecting with Source while we're here. Now, I'm aware I may have done this before, but what we're going to do is do it in a way that allows us to stay here on Earth and not need to go up the frequencies, for instance, to achieve it. And this is good for us because it means we don't need to go through an even more lengthier process of meditation to be able to achieve it. We just need to recognise that we are, as incarnate beings, a smaller aspect of Source anyway. Of course, our true energetic self is a smaller aspect, or an individualised sentient aspect of Source, and as souls we are an individualised sentient aspect of our true energetic self. And so the lineage is that although we're individualised from an individualisation, we are still an individualisation of Source anyway. So based upon this, it's only logical to assume that we can connect with Source at our level and not need to be in any other level, because the levels that we're at are also part of Source anyway. The multiverse is a function of a, shall we say, a segmented area of the structure of the Source. Okay. If you extrapolate it further, by the way, you'll find out that we are an individualised function of origin as well. But that's a different level of understanding, which I'm sure that you're all capable of achieving anyway. Otherwise, you wouldn't be listening to this recording. Okay, so let's get ourselves in a meditative state. So if you go straight backed chair, sit in your straight backed chair. If you prefer to sit down in cross-legged position or a half or a full lotus, that's up to you. The most important thing is that you are comfortable, that you're alert, aware and awake, and that your eyes are closed, and you start to blank out the physical world around you. So if you're in a straight backed chair, feet flat on the ground, palms uppermost on the upper thighs. Palms can be uppermost on the upper thighs on the sitting cross-legged as well. Back is straight, neck is straight, eyes are closed, and the closed eye vision is focused on the origin of the third eye, which is in between the two eyebrows and above the bridge of the nose. Okay. And in previous meditations on connecting with Source, we visualised this tube of energy, this rotating, irradiating tube of energy. But we're not going to do that in this particular instance. We're going to just sit here and allow ourselves to become dematerialized. And by that I mean move ourselves away from being the incarnate being. The association with our human form is the association with our incarnate beingness. And so what I want you to do now is to use your mentally spoken word by repeating the same words that I use if you have trouble visualising, or indeed visualise that the gross physical body that you're in, and the room, and the chair that you're on, or the floor that you're sitting on, starts to just fall apart, starts to dematerialise. And so you're in dematerialising yourself, you're removing your association with the gross physical and your incarnate state. And you're starting to recreate your association with a purely sentient, energetic state. So just think about, at the same time you're thinking about your human body, that the environment that you're in also does the same thing. So the cells of the human form start to just move away from each other so that there's no longer a human form. The atoms associated with it also start to break down. They break down to the anew. But in breaking down to the anew, they have to go through the breakdown of the electrons, protons and neutrons breaking away from the atom, so there's no atomic structure. In breaking away from the atomic structure, of course, they also break away from the cellular structure. So the cellular structure destroys, the atomic structure destroys in going down to the anew, the subatomic structure destroys, the quark structure destroys, the structure below the quarks destroys, the structure above the anew destroys, and the structure of the anew also destroys. So this means that things that stick together to create a new structure above the anew, the structure below the quarks, the electrons, protons and neutrons, the atoms in the cells, are all dissipated or destroyed. And so there is no structure there of the gross physical variety. The anew being the lowest structure associated with the physical universe, the lowest structure of gross physicality. And so all we have is our sentience. We can no longer feel our bodies, we can no longer feel that we're sitting or sitting cross-legged. We can no longer feel the blood coursing through our veins, hear our heart beating, or feel the movement of our eyes. All we can do is be and think. And in this state we are truly de-individualized, other than the fact that our sentience is still individualized. So as de-individualized from an incarnate state, we are now connected through our removal of the individualization from the gross physical. We are connected to our true energetic self properly, and therefore connected to source properly. But as an individualized unit of sentience of our true energetic self, we are also an individualized unit of sentience from the source as well. And so we have the capacity to, as individualized source sentience, to connect with the larger body of source sentience. And so visualize yourself as a drop of water falling down from a height into a sea of sentience. And so in this sea, as a drop of sentience disappears into the sea of sentience, there is no separation. We are connected to the sea. We are the sea. We are one with the source is one with us, and we are the source. So the connection is made here, where our sentience is currently focused. So just allow this oneness with source, this oneness with source sentience, be your connection. You are now connected in totality. You always were, you always will be, but this is creating a focus for that smaller part of your sentience, the soul, that has thought itself to be on its own, separate, disconnected. So everything that was used is now gone, dissipated, destroyed. All the individuality is gone. You are connected to source because you are source. And so everything that is source permeates everywhere, because there is nothing to stop you from being anything other than source at all. Source is everywhere, and you are everywhere with source. So the connection with who and what you are is no longer appropriate as being who and what you are from the connection perspective. And so if you start to recreate the individuality of bringing the anew together, use your intention to bring the anew together, to start to recreate your physical form. And then use your intention to bring the structure above the anew together. And then use your intention to bring the structure below the quarks together. Now while you're doing this, you should notice that although this structure is there, it is fully connected to source. Source permeates it. So on the quark, stratus and charm level, although we use our intention to bring those back together again to create the next structure, everything that's in the middle of it is source. The structure is source. We are connected to source. We have the ability to work with source. Then we bring the atomic structure below the atom together, the protons, neutrons, electrons. And that creates the atoms bringing the atoms together, allows us to create the cellular structure. And so the gaps in between all of these things is full of connected source sentience, more than before. And so you should feel energized, you should feel focused, you should feel awake, you should feel that you can ask any question, and the answer to that question comes to you. There isn't anything that has been done, could have been done, should have been done, will be done, that hasn't already been in existence. And so everything can be experienced, and everything can be answered. Your connection to Source is there. So you should feel elated and wonderful and loved. So we'll just stay here for a moment so you can feel and work with this level of communion with Source, knowing it is there all of the time. Just because we've recreated the energies that create the physical form doesn't mean that it disappears. It's now fully integrated with it. It's not surrounded by source entity energy. Source entity energy, sentience, source entity sentience permeates it on every level, right into the structure that creates the Inu itself. You might feel a little bit sleepy or tired or woolly-headed or difficulty in thinking as well. But in essence you will feel as if you are something more than you are from a human being perspective. That you feel expansive, expanded and higher. And so slowly come back into the room and open your eyes. You might feel a little bit giddy, but recognise that you're connected. You are one with the Source, and the Source is one with you, and you are therefore Source. Drink some water if you have some water. This helps to ground you a little bit. And so this brings us to the end of this particular Satsanga, the first Satsanga of 2017, and thank you very much for listening to it and participating in it and sending questions in and passing it on to others. It'll be the raw recording on my website, and it'll be the modified recording with imagery on Kevin Moore's website. I thank Kevin for continuing to do his wonderful work of turning it into a high quality recording with some very interesting imagery associated with it, and also passing it on to his following as well. And so God's love to you all, and it's wonderful to be of service, and I look forward to working with you again on February Satsanga. So good morning, good night, good afternoon, and again much love to you, blessings and namaste.